right, guys, welcome on into Second and Short. This is episode 6 of our new edition playlist that we got going on for you guys. And today we are joined yet again with another special guest. Ken Hartley is back again to talk some NFL with us. Ken, welcome on in, and how are you doing?
Man, doing good. Thank you guys for having me. I think I got the audio working good this time.
Yeah, we'll be able to hear you on your own audio, and it'll sound great.
Well, last time I was in an Airstream, one-person Airstream, and it sounded a little pingy, like a tin roof, but I'm out of the Airstream now, so I'm good.
And of course, we are joined with the Aaron Ben, who decided to wake up this morning just to talk to us. What a guy.
Especially for you guys. That's just kind of the guy I am.
But I'm not going to do what I've been doing and doing these weird lead-ins. We're just going to talk about it. Greg Olsen, Seattle Seahawks. This is who we are thinking about as going to have the biggest impact on this team. And as we get into this episode, we'll talk about if that impact is going to be short-term, long-term, both, what we think. But first, we're going to kind of just go with a little background on Greg Olsen. Alrighty, so Greg Olsen obviously was drafted in the first round out of the University of Miami, like tight end university, back in 2007. And then, in 2008, in his second year, he led the team in touchdown catches and was second in yards. And then 2009, he continued to do this with that Bears team, and he led the team in receptions and touchdowns and was second in yards. But then everything kind of changed around 2010, 2011.
Yeah, 2011, he was traded to the Panthers for a third-round pick where he would kind of stay there for the next few years. Production steadily increased. And then in 2014, 2016, he had 3 consecutive years of 1,000 yards receiving, which is an NFL record for tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you go back to tight end Greg Olsen is arguably the best tight end to ever come out of there when you're talking Kellen Winslow or German Shockley. He won awards there year after year, and like you said, he got drafted by the Bears, but probably they traded him for a third-round pick. That's kind of the Bears gig, and then, Carolina just knocked it out with the 3,000-yard seasons in a row and, around 6 or 7 touchdowns. I think, made Chicago not look so good on that deal.
Yeah.
No, and what's crazy, too, is that he was the first tight end in history to do this. And I remember, because, I'm a big Panthers fan, so, I was, super giddy about it. I would defend him when everybody's like, who's the best tight end? I'd be like, it's Greg Olsen, because he gets 1,000 yards in a row. Nobody does that. He plays 100% of every snap. He doesn't miss a snap. He's a great blocker. And, yeah, the fact that Carolina got him for a third-round pick, the same time that they drafted Cam Newton, it was just, a great stars aligning type thing.
Yeah, and you always talk about how rookie quarterbacks or young quarterbacks need that tight end safety valve, and that's kind of exactly what Greg Olsen was. But he wasn't just a safety valve. He was his number one receiver as a tight end. So he had those 3 consecutive years of 1,000 receiving yards. Then he kind of got the injury bug. He missed most of 2017 and then almost half of 2018 with injury. And then he came back last year and he added about 600 yards in 14 games. And then just this past offseason in February, he was released.
Yeah, he had that foot injury, which, like you said, was in 2017, and I think he came back early from it. I think he tried to press the action. He's been a guy who's played a lot of games, so I think he came back a little too early, and I heard him in 2018. But his foot looked good last year. I know he missed a couple games because of concussion, but I would say that was a healthy season last year.
And I would say him getting 600 yards, considering the fact that Kyle Allen was his quarterback for the majority of the season, it's a very positive thing. Kyle Allen just got traded for a 5th-round pick to go be a backup in Washington. So, that's, to me, that shows a lot. And what I want to see the most, and we'll talk about a little later, is if Greg Olsen is able to be that locker room coach for younger tight ends, because obviously Ian Thomas is right there picking the ear of, Greg Olsen, hopefully, every single day. But then that all ended back in February. The Carolina Panthers, I don't know what it is. There's something about this team that I hate supporting when it comes to releasing veterans. They did Steve Smith dirty. Then they do Greg Olsen dirty. And then with Cam Newton, same situation. But with Greg Olsen, if you guys remember, and you guys can help me out if I'm missing a part, but it was essentially they were like, we've agreed to mutually part ways. And then Greg was like, what the fuck? No, he didn't. They're cutting me.
he posted it on social media like, what? We did? And Greg Olsen, I mean, if you know Greg Olsen's, lineage, I mean, he's Merlin Olsen's son, who's, arguably the greatest defensive tackle ever. He's incredibly religious and honorable and upstanding citizen. Like you can't. He's the kind of guy you want to marry your daughter. So for him to do that was totally out of character. I think that really encapsulates how Carolina's upper management treats its veteran players. It was shocking to me too.
Yeah, and it's not the move that was surprising. It was just the way they handled it.
Yes,
because he was carrying a heavy cap. It made sense. Carolina's rebuilding. It makes sense. But so let's talk about the contract, Aaron. This is going to be short and sweet because he's a veteran. But what was the contract that he signed?
Yeah, I mean, he just signed just a 1-year deal with Seattle. Going to make $7 million. I think it's something around 3.5 or 4 guaranteed. So that's just short deal. Old veteran. You don't know how long he's got left in the league.
So Ken, as a Seahawks fan, like when you heard that deal, I mean, every fan, like they hear we signed this player, and then you wait. Like, what did we spend to get him? What are your initial reactions on that when you heard the deal?
I thought it was a little pricey, just because of the injury history and the fact that he's 35 years old. And it's not, it was a little pricey, I thought, but I was happy with the signing personally, just for the fact that, tight ends don't get talked about as being blockers. They don't get a lot of credit for that, but his ability to block and stay on the field last year, I think really helped Christian McCaffrey quite a bit sign that record contract. And if you follow Seattle is a heavy run first offensive team. So I was happy with it. I thought, he's got a name to him. It's kind of more of a splashier deal, but they got a couple younger guys there that can learn a lot from him. I think you hit on the locker room presence. I haven't followed him as much as you have, obviously, but that seems like really why they signed him was that locker room presence, the ability to block. I think he can still create mismatches. I think he can tutor and coach people. It's 1 year. It's 1 year. No, it's good. It's 1 year. So.
Well, when you look at the current tight end depth, it starts making even more sense because like their current like main tight ends are Luke Wilson, who's kind of a longtime Seahawk, and he's been kind of a fan, not like a fan favorite, but the fans always kind of appreciate him. He's more of a blocking tight end. And then they have Will Dissly, who showed a lot of promise in 2018, but was also injured most of 2018 and then last year as well. And then Jacob Hollister is like a fringe player. People remember him for that catch against the Niners, but other than that, he hasn't really done a whole lot. He hasn't figured to be like this big playmaker at the tight end position. So that's kind of where Greg Olsen comes in. He can provide some immediate depth, immediate veteran leadership and production at the tight end position.
Yeah, and I think that right there is we're all kind of just circling around it, but we're hitting the nail on the head. Is that he's obviously going to come in, he's going to be the starter, he's going to produce, and he's going to mentor. And that's the biggest thing here too. Is I mean, Dissly and Hollister have a lot of potential. They really do. Dissly the most is as long as he can stay healthy. But if Greg Olsen can, it's weird. It's like a bridge because Dillsley still has to recover. We don't know what his status is going to be coming into 2020. So Greg Olsen can bring him along slowly, let Seattle like give him time to rest and not force him back. Because that's what happens with a lot of these players that have potential. Like you got to get back on the field. Otherwise that potential is wasted because we have nobody else. But, let's go back in time. Let's talk about March. Now, Greg Olsen had a very interesting situation because since he was cut so early in the offseason, he was allowed to sign with a team before free agency opened. Let's just talk about that, Aaron. Lead us in, and we'll kind of jump in here, but lead us in with all like the visits he had and stuff like that. What led to his signing in Seattle?
Olsen also had visits with the Bills and the Redskins this year, and I guess from his comments, it kind of just sounds like he wanted to go to a contender. Not saying the Bills aren't a contender, but you got Seattle, who's been up there for a long time now, and Bills, who just seem to be up and coming. And we're not going to even talk about the Redskins trying to be a contender. he was quoted as saying, between the fan base and the city, and obviously the sustained success they've had, the coach and the quarterback, there's not a whole lot that they're missing. So it's fair to say that the Seattle quarterback, Russell Wilson, also played a huge factor in his decision. Olsen had 3 consecutive seasons with 1,000 yards, with Cam Newton, who's a mobile quarterback, can avoid pressure with his legs, extend plays with his feet, and can even make plays when it seems nothing's there.
Yeah, he obviously came there to win a Super Bowl. I mean, he could have gone to. I guess I'm sure Washington would have paid him a lot of money, but obviously he doesn't need a paycheck, so he stopped on that. And then he got Buffalo, which is like an up and coming team, who could potentially. I mean, they made it deep last year and had a good season, but I think when you think 1 year at a time, you think Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson can win any game at any time. That's not a guy. There's a handful of guys that you do not want to go against when it matters, and Russell Wilson's one of them. He can beat any team on any given Sunday, period. So I think that's a true wild card, like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, those guys, there's a handful of guys that can win even when they're an underdog by 10 points on the road in the snow. It doesn't even matter. They can just win. And I think if you're going to put your cards all in, Seattle's a great pick. It always has been.
Yeah, and I think the biggest surprise from this right here is if they're going to use Olsen and Disley at the same time. I mean, Seattle only played 12 personnel last year, about 14% of the time we were talking about. And that was like 25th in the league or something like that. But the fact that Olsen and Disley can be these pass catching options, I mean, Seattle is kind of evolving. It used to kind of be like they had a top heavy, like it was like Doug Baldwin, and then it was like a bunch of whatever guys that can kind of get open and, for the receivers and tight ends. And that's changed now. And we're saying, I mean, this wide receiving group with, Lockett and Metcalf, and they just signed Philip Dorsett over. I mean, then we talk about these tight ends. I mean, they're becoming more dynamic. And this right now might be the best receiving core overall that Wilson's ever had.
It's true. Unfortunately, it's true. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it kind of models Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady somewhat, where they don't spend the money on the receivers or on the offensive line because these guys can just do so much on their own. I mean, it's fascinating to me that's the model they take, but it's worked. I mean, Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl and Brady has 6 and Rodgers has 1. It's just the way they do it. Crazy.
And I think like a big impact, and you can agree with me if you want or disagree, and it doesn't matter to me, but I think Olsen is going to take away a lot of looks from like coverage away from like Metcalf and Lockett. He's going to allow them to have some more one-on-one, and because like safeties can't leave Olsen open in the middle because he can create separation very well. He's a very efficient route runner. Like if you ever wanted to think of a player as like a video game character, it could be like Greg Olsen. He just does it by the book. There's just, if it's drawn up that way, he's going to run it better than anybody else. That's just what he does.
Yeah, and I think you have to take into account as well, they have a new old main rival in the NFC West. You guys remember like back in the Super Bowl year when they won the Super Bowl, and then the Niners went to the Super Bowl the year before that. They had this huge rivalry with San Francisco. Every year, it's like that was the main matchup in that division, and that's kind of what it's turned into again. Like last year, the 2 games with them, they were insane. So one of their main goals now is to get by the Niners and their games, and so a good way that you can, like a strategy that some teams have been using to beat the Niners and their just terrifying pass rush is to get the ball to those tight ends who can get out and provide quick options over the middle or in the flat, so that if the quarterback's under pressure, you can just get it out to them. And in addition, like the Niners, they were pretty good in red zone defense last year in terms of efficiency, but they struggled down the stretch in December, and they let up 11 touchdowns on 12 red zone attempts in the month of December. And so Greg Olsen, if they can kind of take advantage of that, maybe that trend kind of continues, And Greg Olsen can provide a big target in the red zone as well.
And yeah, that's one of the matchups we talked about. Is like that was like on our top 7 most intriguing matchups for 2020 was Week 17 for the NFC West, which is going to come down to Seattle versus San Francisco. And I feel like everybody everywhere that would predict games would say that game is probably going to determine who wins the division, just because these teams play so well and so close to each other. So having a veteran like that, if Olsen stays healthy in December, I mean, that could be the difference right there. Not just him getting the ball, but it could just Metcalf could go off. You know, a lot of things could happen here.
When Olsen signed that deal, I don't think in his mind he was thinking of being a star player for the team. I think he was, thinking about the team, which, like you said, if he has one catch for 7 yards, but he's able to seal the edge 17 times when a running back's, making 5 and 6 yards a carry. People forget Seattle had San Francisco's numbers last year. I think San Francisco was 10-0 or 9-0 when they faced them the first time, and Seattle beat them. And San Francisco, I mean, they probably should have won that Super Bowl. So that's how close Seattle is, and that's 1 or 2 blocks away from. These games are so razor thin when it gets to these Final 4 and these Final 8. A player like this can be the difference maker, even without showing up in the stat line.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Now let's move into impact, and we've kind of dabbled in this right now and tested the waters here, but let's just go short-term impact. Aaron, lead us off here on what Olsen's going to do, and even if you repeat what we've already said, doesn't matter. Let's talk about that impact.
I mean, with Greg Olsen, you can't really talk about anything other than short-term impact because of you don't know what he's gonna do next year. He gives Wilson another weapon, that kind of safety valve, but not just a safety valve. I said it before. He can be that main target, and he's definitely going to take targets away from their receivers like Lockett and Metcalf. I think that'll help them out as well. And he provides, like we said, leadership. He comes in, he's got the knowledge, got the skills, he's got the production in a kind of a questionable tight end room right now. Like we talked about, Disley has a ton of potential, but he's got the injury bug too. I think if Greg Olsen can come in and stay healthy, he can really help out the team this year.
Yeah, Olsen's going to be the tight end number 1 there. I mean, you got Hollister and Disley, but they're not going to be starting. And I agree with you, Ty, when you talk about Seattle's past. They very rarely use 2 tight ends. If they're going to transition to that this year, then I think that's a way to run the ball more or protect Wilson a little more. But he's going to be out there. He's going to be out there pretty much every snap. He played healthy last year, and I think his impact it's not going to show up as much in the box score, but I think it's going to show up, and I think Seattle can make a very deep run this year at it. I really do.
I mean, even if all he impacts is let's say even if I'm not going to give this as my prediction, but if he only gets 400 yards receiving, but their rushing yards per game increases, we can say that he's a contributor to that 100%. And that might be even better, because if Seattle can run the ball more effectively, they can take more time off the clock, they can control the game, control the pace. If he can block more than some of these other tight ends, Wilson can have a longer career. I mean, it's not like Wilson's been banged up a lot in his career, but I'm just saying, when you start hitting a certain point in your career as a quarterback, injuries just kind of start to happen that you don't expect. And so I think having an extra blocker, I mean, even if he hot routes and he can just block first and then go out, but also Olsen can play in the slot too. So they can make this unit very dynamic all across the board. So Aaron, you said there's no real long-term with Greg Olsen due to his age. We agree. He's in his mid-30s. He's had a couple of long injury seasons in 17 and 18. But let's just give a hypothetical of a long-term, what do you think? Do you think he can play 2 more years?
I kind of see it if the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, if they win it all and he gets his ring, I think 100% for sure he retires. If not, I can kind of see it 50-50. if the Seahawks, maybe they get really close and just miss a Super Bowl or lose a Super Bowl, maybe he signs another year because he's kind of left with that taste in his mouth. But I think like if they're not even close, or like if they're kind of a middling team, I think he'll just call it quits as well. That's kind of how I see it.
I mean, for Greg Olsen, it's not even about money. For a lot of players, you're like, oh, they're gonna kind of like keep playing and milk more money and everything. As soon as Greg Olsen wants to stop playing in the NFL, he's going to be commentating in the NFL. Like he already for Carolina the past like 3 years on their bye week would fly somewhere, commentate a game on Carolina's bye week, and he sounds great. I mean, he's not like Tony Romo, but he's way above Jason Witten. Way above Jason Witten.
I think I'm above Jason Witten.
Yeah, that's probably. And I just think I either way, we're going to see Greg Olsen in the NFL for a long time. It's just for the Seahawks, long term. Ken, do you have anything different there long term? Do you think this could be more than 1 year?
I honestly, not in Seattle. I don't. Even if he's super close, I don't see them bringing him back for $7.5 million. I mean, if he wants to sign a veteran minimum at $1 million, I would think they would keep him. But I think this year was an investment year that they could put in and get a return on that. And I don't think 2 years does that with him. It depends how bad he wants to win a Super Bowl. If they get super close and want to bring him back on a minimum, I think he plays a second year there. If they win, I totally agree with Aaron. He can. I mean, his dad had some chops too for broadcasting. Merlin Olsen's broadcasting was amazing. Yeah. So he's set there. It's not money, and he's never lived an extravagant lifestyle anyway. So it could go 2 years. If it goes 2 years, it's because Seattle barely missed, and he signs a veteran minimum contract.
Okay, now let's move into predictions, and this can be whatever you guys want it to be. If you guys want to say he's gonna have 1,000-yard season, then just say it. Be bold. Nobody's gonna hate you here. So, Ken, let's start with you. Lead us off. Give us your prediction on Greg Olsen's 2020.
I think he's good for 4 to 5 catches a game at 40 to 50 yards a game. So I would say minimum, 600 yards, maximum 800 yards receiving, and anywhere from 48 to 60 receptions. I think he is a sweet red zone target, and Russell can buy time in the red zone. So I do peg him for 6 touchdowns as well. So I'll go on the average, I would say 60 reception, 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, and a lot of good blocks.
Yes. Aaron?
I kind of am in the same boat, maybe a bit less yards. I kind of had written down here around 500 yards with a handful of tutties. And that's providing that he stays healthy. Like, we have to see that 2017, 2018 were just flukes and that he's not this injury-prone player now. And so that's kind of how I see it. But in my opinion, with that promising future in broadcasting, I think he's done after this year no matter what.
For me, 2020, I think it's just going to be like a little Tony Gonzalez, end of the ride, type thing. And I think it might be his last year as well. I think he's going to come out and he's going to have a solid, I think anywhere from, if he gets over 50 catches, that's a good season. I would say 50 to 60 catches is where I want him to be at. And if he can get around 600 to 650 yards, that's a season for me. But really, he's going to show up in 2 different ways. He's going to get about 7-8 touchdowns, which is kind of high for an older guy and everything. But the biggest thing here is that he's going to help in the run game. I agree. He's going to make a big impact off the stat sheet. Last year, Seattle averaged 137 yards per game in rushing yards, which was good for 4th in the league. So it's hard to really improve on that. But I really do think with more run blocking help, they can push this mold towards 150 a game. They really can. They're not going to be the Baltimore Ravens by any means and run for over 200 yards a game because they throw too much. But I think he's going to help Russell Wilson continue to be as efficient as he is, give him a nice check down option, and then the run game is going to help and benefit, and they're going to move up towards that top 2 or 3 as well. And that's going to do it for us on Greg Olsen. the new Seattle Seahawk. He is here to, go get that ring, play for that contender. So thank you guys for joining us here on Second and Short. Be sure to, leave a like if you like what we're talking about. And if you don't like what we're talking about, leave a comment down below. Tell us what we did wrong. Tell us who you agree with, me. Tell us who you disagree with, Aaron. No, probably. And just let us know. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on everything. And if you want to see all the other episodes from this new editions, click the icon on the top right. Got a full playlist there for you as well.
And check us out. We're on social media now. Check us out on Facebook. We're posting a bunch of stuff there. Coming with some discussion. We're on Instagram. I've been trying to keep Instagram going every day with new posts, news updates, and kind of a little bit of humor as well. And we're working on an OnlyFans too, so stay tuned for that.
And dude, click on the link below to get 10% off protein powder, man. It's like...
Not yet, man. Not yet.
You gotta monetize this shit, homie.
I know, man. As soon as we get sponsors, nobody sponsors us yet. We're too uncut.
Hey, good news. I'm on 29 minutes of audio right now. That's a good sign.
Yes. Alrighty. Well, thank you for joining us, Ken. I was gonna let you say anything if you want to.
I said too much already.
Alrighty. That's gonna do it for us. You guys have a good night.